This week's reading is from Rays of the One Light, a book with parallel commentaries from the Gita and the Bible as written by Swami Kriyanandaji, guided by his Guru Paramahansa Yoganandaji. So this reading is titled, To Each According to His Faith. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 3, we read, Everyone that evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. But he that beginning to need glasses too. But he that doth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they are wrought in God. It is a common experience shared by most people that when a person errs, he experiences a desire to hide that error from his conscience instead of holding it up for purification. Error clutches its misdeeds to itself and resists correction, though it is only in the state of purity that we can achieve perfect freedom. It requires an act of will to offer that awareness up to the light and to hold it there until one's inner darkness is completely dissipated. For every state of consciousness has its own attractive power, and the more we allow that attraction to act upon us, the more we attract to ourselves the objective circumstances and experiences natural to it. Our faith is the attractive power of our underlying state of consciousness. Goodness attracts goodness. It takes goodness even to see goodness. Evil attracts evil, and it takes evil even to see evil, that is, to take special note of its existence. Whatever there is in you of darkness or light, offer it up to the heights. In the supreme light alone we will find salvation. Accept nothing less in yourself as your lasting reality. As the Bhagavad Gita says in the 12th chapter, Cling thou to me, clasp me with heart and mind, so shalt thou dwell surely with me on high. But if thy thought droop from such heights, if thou beest weak to set body and soul upon me constantly, despair not. Give me lower service, seek to reach me, worshipping me with steadfast will. And if thou canst not worship steadfastly, work for me, toil in works pleasing to me. For he that laboureth right for love of me shall finally attain. But if in this thy faint heart fails, bring me thy failure. Thus through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
This reading is from Whispers from Eternity by Paramahansa Yogananda, a book of prayer poems. This is entitled, I Beheld Thee Hiding Behind the Flowers. I looked at a flower and prayed. Suddenly, O Father, I beheld Thee hiding there. It exuded to me the perfume of Thy presence. I saw the blush of Thy purity coloring its petals. It was the gold, Thy wisdom that shone in its heart. Thine all-embracing, upholding power filled its delicate calyx. The mystery of life and the immortality lay in the pollen, lifted by the bee when it tasted Thy sweetness. O teach me Thy wonders of creation, which are hinted at even in the tiniest roadside weed. Excuse me. Well, this subject today of deeds versus, to each according to his faith. It's such a vital thing to understand. And it comes up in many different stages on the spiritual path. Rather, it comes up at all stages of the spiritual path. And it's important for us to take it as appropriate to ourselves at the stage that we are, or the stage of growth that we are. In other words, it's not as if the number of years on the path determines our growth. It's certainly correlated, one hopes. But it isn't that all parts of us grow at the same time. There may be some parts of us leaping ahead and other parts that are coming along more slowly. And so even though in some situations we may have made great progress, we may find in other situations we have to really work with ourselves in a different way. For example, in some cases we can be motivated simply by a statement from the scriptures, or we can read autobiography of a yogi and apply master's teachings to a situation, you could say more sort of philosophically. Take a philosophical approach to our problems and feel, yes, the truth. And it just sort of disperses or dispels that particular test. Other times, we can try that and it somehow doesn't quite work for us, because there's perhaps a part of us that's hurt and just needs comfort. And then we should try to approach ourselves in that way. And not think of it as, oh, well, because in this I can't apply the teachings because I'm so small or wounded or something. No, we don't want to judge anything like that. Swamiji said if a little child falls down and scrapes her knee and cries, you don't stand over the child and say, well, after all, it is karma. And you were not paying attention to where you are going, and you have paid the price. Maybe try to do some kriya or something. He said, you hold the child. You say, I'm so sorry that this happened, and just be. And so there'll be parts of us that will have that. And it's the same thing with Divine Mother. She looks at us that way too. Suppose we lose our job and are publicly humiliated unfairly. For some people, that's kind of like a disaster they don't even like to imagine. And she holds us and says, oh, I'm so sorry. And should I kiss it and make it better? For her, it's the same as a scraped knee. She says, my God, in your last life you should have seen the whole house blew up. This is nothing compared to that. But, she has that perspective. And she's just saying, even if this is a little tiny custom thing, for us it's this massive thing. But it's no different than if a child's toy gets broken and has to be fixed or has to be thrown away. We see it that from our perspective, and so does Divine Mother. And kindly, lovingly, I don't mean she trivializes our suffering. When a child suffers over something that seems to us trivial, it's not that the child's tears are trivial. Anybody we know, if we care about them, if they're suffering, because we love them, we take their suffering seriously, even if it's not something that would particularly bother us. Now, in the beginning on the spiritual path, which is to say, when we first come to it in this lifetime. Now, even then I have to stop. It's almost as if to say, now we come to the spiritual path. But that word now, in this case, has a deep meaning, because now means also what came before. Well, we were on the spiritual path before. Somebody asked in the Wednesday class, why is it that when we're born in this life, we don't sort of take up the same spiritual progress that we had in any past lives? And I said, we do. Oh. I said, I can only say that categorically because Krishna says it. He says the yogi who doesn't make it quickly returns to the spiritual path, picks up where he or she left off, and marches on. And the person asked, quite understandably, yes, but it took me many years of this lifetime as an adult before I got onto the spiritual path, and what about all that other time? Well, first of all that other time in our lives when we were not watching God, God was still watching us. We were not knowing Master's name. He knew our name. He knew our name probably before we were born, not probably, certainly. Even if at the last minute your parents changed your name to that, no, he knew that. He knew what it would be. And even in probably when we sat with him in the last life, he said, your name in the next life is going to be Bala. So we don't have to ever think, again, how do I know? Because even Babaji told Lahiri Mahashai when they met, I watched you for 33 years before we met, and so on. So the Guru is always watching. We can have faith in that because he cares very much about each of us that way. So we don't want to think about whatever came before as somehow a mistake, or it was wrong, or if only we had known we might have made different choices in our earlier life so that we could then have a better life now. Again, those choices, I'm sure Master, God, and Divine Mother were guiding us in that right direction. Even if the right direction, whatever direction this was, we could not call it right. No. Because sometimes difficulties, tests, that's what puts us on the spiritual path. It's what reawakens us. In the astral world, people generally don't make that much spiritual progress. It's more of a vacation time. Nice beach, just the right temperature, no troubles, as Sri Yukteswarji says, no insects and other things that, there's no flies in the ointment and no caterpillars in the salad. There's just no trouble. And so it's very comfortable. Plus, I think it's idli dosa 24 hours a day. And so what's there to meditate about? We can have dosa samadhi. We don't need anything else. And so that people have also said to us, you really need to open a meditation center on the seaside so that in the morning we can have yoga asanas on the beach and meditation on the beach, and then at evening, we can also just be in the sea breeze, and it'll be very, very calm and peaceful. And it's true, it is calm and peaceful, and when we've had centers that are on the beach, very few people come, because it's calm and peaceful. Just sort of either, everything's okay, I don't think I need to worry too much, or else, hey, it's time for sadhana. I think I will have my sadhana with the ocean instead. And it's fine. But at a certain point we want to become the ocean of joy. And then we find that even that sort of half joy is not enough. Something can come and disturb it, or we feel after a while that we're just sleepy. As Master said, you can either have pleasure or pain. There are three emotional states. He said pleasure, pain, and boredom. And he said even if you have some perfect paradise at a certain point, he said people will say, can someone come knock us on the head so that we know we are alive? And he said, in another case, he said, you can ask someone, are you happy? Don't bother me. Are you unhappy? Don't bother me. I am bored. And you see that with people, that they're just sort of bored. It's what it partly comes from, because pleasure and pain are two extremes. You feel pleasure, you feel pain, and then at a certain point you're tired of feeling. So we just are dull, and that's boredom. And we really don't want that state. We don't want our mind to become unfocused. We don't want to just lay like this and so on. It's not a helpful state. It's always good to have your mind present. Even talking to Divine Mother, it's not even, especially talking to Divine Mother about whatever's on your mind. Now, so we have been on the spiritual path for a long time. And in fact, even more broadly than that, everyone in the world is on the spiritual path, as Master said. So we don't want to think of, as one person said to Swamiji in one of the last satsangs he gave at Ananda Village, this young man said, do you have any advice for the newer devotees? And Swamiji said, love God. He said, that's really all you need to do. And it's the most important thing. Like that chant, door of my heart, just love God. But then he said, mind you, you're not a new devotee. He said, you've been on the path for a long, long time. So we don't want to think in terms of what age I was or how many years it's been. It's valid to count the years as long as you count all the years of all the past lifetimes too. And you have no way of knowing yourself or anybody else, so no point in comparing all that. Even if we got the number 6,000 Someone else would say 6,000 and a half for me. So what? We are where we are right in this moment. How do we go forward? Quality over quantity. What have we done with those 6,000 and a half years? Let's make good on it. So, but when we first come onto the spiritual path in this life, on the one hand, we find a great attraction. The parts of ourselves that are positive, that are wanting God, that are wanting to grow, that feel the peace of meditation, that feel the joy in finding like-minded souls, that basically, as Swamiji said, when he came onto the spiritual path, he discovered that all the things that he knew were true, even though everyone in his life had been telling them that's false. And so he had never given up his faith in that, but he had basically no one else to agree with him. And so, of course, it can not only be a little lonely, it can be a little scary. You think, am I losing my mind to think that there's peace and joy and so on, that it's possible in this life? And so it's very strengthening and very healing, and that's part of what this song that Prasanna played, Walk Like a Man, is so important for, that we have to choose that what if men cry, what if other people cry, your dream is not our own. Your soul knows the answer. Go on alone. It's true for many things, of course, the spiritual path. But even in other things, you'll find that we may have a strong preference for something, or we may have a wish or a dream, and somebody says, no. You don't want to waste your time with that. I remember I was in computer science. I was studying computer science and math, and there was someone I knew who was studying computer science and business. And he said, what is your minor? Anyway, I ended up doing a double major. He was doing a double major. What is your other major? I said mathematics. He said, oh, yeah, I also am good at mathematics. And he was. That was the worst part. He was really good at it, so I couldn't he was excellent at it. He said, but it's all just games. And for me, this is right before the spiritual path, so for me I was, he has insulted the sanctity of mathematics. Blasphemy! But it hurt because he just trivialized everything I was interested in. But then, I didn't quite have the guts or the heart to say, yes, but, what do you want to give that up for? Money? Because that's just ephemeral too. It just comes and goes. But that he didn't say, your dream is not my own. That would have been easy. If he just said, oh no, I have other interests, I would have said, more power to you. I have this interest, I'm free to pursue it. You have this interest, you are free to pursue it. Isn't life grand? But instead, he said, oh, that is small, it is pitiful, it is waste, judgment, you see. And so, whenever somebody is judging something of yours, they're really just saying, your dream is not my own. And so, it's that simple. And so, we should keep that in mind too. If we're judging something, that to say, look, that person has the right to pursue their interests, even if it's going to lead them into a direction that causes suffering. How do we know? Because they are suffering already. But they have the right to learn at their own pace. And who knows, maybe when they come to the spiritual path, they'll be far ahead of ourselves, because that's the last thing in their way. So we never want to compare, evaluate, whatever. What we do want to do is help if we can. If the person is actually interested, give advice. Practically never. That's what happened with Dhyanaji. I think I've told you all the story, but I gave advice to somebody. Not a word of advice, not a sentence of advice, pages of advice. And measured in hours. Oh, God. The things we inflict on other people when we first come on the spiritual path. And afterwards, I noticed that his initial smile at seeing me started to fade and turned more and more to a frown. And I thought, he's not smiling anymore. It must mean I need to talk more. at the end of it, he was so upset. And it was, in America, there's sort of this custom, especially, when you're new on the spiritual path, of hugging each other. Oh, how are you? Oh, nice to see you. Oh, thank you, and so on. Swamiji said in one spiritual community he visited, it just seemed to be like, he said there was almost an epidemic of hugging. They seemed to have a mantra, if it moves, hug it. So, thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm still feeling the effects of this virus. The virus is over, the symptoms are over, but the fatigue is still there. And it's true for Dharmini too. If you're thinking about getting this virus, don't. It's not worth it. I said to the first person I knew who got it was somebody I was talking to on the phone, and I said, "How long does the fatigue last? Does it last as much as 2 weeks?" He said, 3. I said, "Oh, God." Anyway, where was I? Do you remember where I was? If it moves, hug it. Thank you, Napoleon. If it moves, hug it. So at the end of the conversation with this person, I sort of thought, it finally dawned on me that maybe it was my words that caused the problem with his face. And so I sort of hugged him goodbye, and his hug was kind of like with tweezers, like. And it occurred to me that I had made a big mistake, and so I walked over to Dhyanaji and I said, How do you give advice to people? She said, I don't. And Swamiji pointed that out too, that it's just better not to give advice unless it's earnestly asked for it, and earnestly, sincerely. Even then you have to be very careful. Why? Partly because if you give the right advice at the wrong time, the person will, I don't want to hear that. And then later, when it's the right time for them to hear it, they already have a negative association with it because you poked them earlier. And so this happened with somebody, though, with Swamiji. He knew her. I think this was in Italy. Anyway, she said to him, I would like you to give me some spiritual advice. And he knew that she did not want to hear it, anything, partly because, as Prasanna read in the reading, there just wasn't an openness to being corrected. She didn't show that receptivity, that willingness to change herself based on what he had observed of her. And again, there are people like that, and remember, if we say, well, they are resistant to change. Well, they're resistant to change probably in this one area that we are desperate for them to change. But they probably do change in other areas. Maybe in their career, they're very good at learning some new thing or realizing this strategy could be improved or so on. We never want to reduce a person to one dimension. And why not? Because I'm sure you have felt reduced to one dimension by other people at times. Because this thing is displeasing to me, you can as well be deleted. And they just will dismiss you, and just for one little thing. So let us also be careful not to pick one thing out. Master was like this too. Swamiji said he would sometimes have the most difficult people around him that would sort of torture everybody else. And people would say, but sir, this person is so difficult. And he would always find a way, Master, something positive about the person. He's such a good father to his children, for example, or he's very sincere and so on. Yeah, he's sincerely beating me over the head, but no, he's a good person. And you've heard him say that in the recording, if you've listened to it. He said, someone will say that this person, because they do one bad thing against you, that person is bad. He said, it's like a piano that has one wrong key. Just change the key. Don't say the person is bad. And that's helpful too. Why? Because then we will be less tempted to say that we are bad. It's useful to us because we can get caught up too if we have this personality. One thing wrong with us and we say, oh, it's just so terrible. I'm such a bad person. Well, it's not true at all. There are many components of ourselves. And no one is perfect in all things unless they're one with God. They're adorning some other realm with their beautiful presence. So we're all in the same boat. Until we're one with God, we're all in the same boat. Everybody has something to work on. So in that way, we're all equal as children of God. So be confident in that when someone tries to lord it over you. I mean, you can say to your boss, we're all children of God. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're same as me. Yeah, maybe even younger. So maybe don't say that out loud. But but we're all equal that way, and everybody has the same equal rights as children of God. And so to just relax around all of that. So anyway, this woman said to Swamiji, I want some advice. And he said, I'd rather not say anything. No, come on, I've seen you give other people advice. I would like some advice. He said, well, I'm just not in come on, tell me something. So he said, he gave her a piece of advice, something that she needed to work on. And he said, I hope you're not upset. Upset? I'm not upset. Just disappointed. And then that was it. She'd had it with him for years. But years later, he saw her. And she came up to him and she said, thank you so much for what you said to me. I didn't like it at the time you told me, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. And but again, unless you're trying to drive the person away for years, better not to just say anything or say something small or whatever. And most people, you're actually not in danger of everybody coming up to you asking for advice. It's not all that common. It's much more common to be given advice and so or to give advice than to actually ask for it. And also think of that yourself. Don't necessarily take the advice of anybody for yourself. You have to weigh the truth of it. Is it true at all? And then even if it is true, is it true for you? One of the first questions I asked Swamiji when I met him was, I feel love for people, but I also fear them in their power to hurt me. And he said, you make the mistake of when talking to other people and hearing their advice, because I was a point in my life where I was needing advice, so I thought about whether I should move to Ananda and live there, or whether I should stay in the career path I had chosen and just kind of meditate on the side. And even if I lived at Ananda, I would still have a job in the world, and I did, and work there. It wasn't a question of that, working or not, but just whether moving to California, which was a big thing on the other side of the country. And he said, you make the mistake of thinking that other people have your interests in mind when they give advice, for example. They don't have your interests in mind. They have their own interests in mind. So, what are they going to say? Do something that I wouldn't like to do? No, of course not. Do something that, that I'm afraid of? No. Very few people will have that sort of, honest approach or detached approach, being able to see it from your perspective rather than their own. It's not even easy to do. So then he said, why don't you just, you'll have to just develop more confidence like I did. It's very sweet. Swamiji was extremely confident, one of the most confident people I knew, but he threw that in very sweetly, just so. And then he also said that until then, why don't you trust your own intuition? And he must have seen my face, because I was so full of self-doubt. I kind of went, trust my own intuition? Not possible, because I was so filled with self-doubt. What if what I'm thinking is wrong? And so he said, or ask people whose opinion you respect. And that made a big difference, that I should ask people who actually knew what I was talking about, who were interested at least in the same things. And not just anyone in the world. I mean, I was asked basically thinking of leaving my field, and the only people I talked to were the people in my field. So what were they going to say? By all means, dump it. This is all a waste of time anyway. We all know it. Of course not. They were part of the being in the club means this is really important, right? We all say, yes, we are important. That's kind of the self-congratulation and the self-affirmation, especially in the academic field. You know, as they say, the competition is so fierce because the stakes are so low. Anyway, forgive me, because when I was in the academic field, I hated hearing that. But to some extent, it's true. It only matters what is true. Luckily, even one of my friends, one of the computer scientists, because people would say, you owe it to the field to continue. And she said, what is that? I hate it when people say that. What is the field? There is no field. It's just us. Because she was one of the top computer scientists. There were others. It's just all of us working on this thing. There's no field you owe anything. You should be happy. And later, when I told her I am going to move to Ananda and become a school teacher in their school there, she said, you know, I really envy you because you found your passion. And I do this, but it's not my passion. I know some people who do what I do, and they're passionate about it. But anyway, so she had that sort of presence of mind and didn't at all take any offense that I was thinking of leaving. That's why most people discourage us from coming onto the spiritual path, because on some level they feel it's a rejection of worldly values. Again, it doesn't mean there are no worldly values. It's just that the spiritual values are higher, more important to us than just the worldly things. And many people resist that because that's not how they feel. So we're kind of insulting what they worship. And so it's not a surprise that they would argue or complain about it. So, and again, we should be careful that we're not judging them. We should never say, oh, that's very worldly of you. I mean, we don't want to ever be in a position where we're putting ourselves above someone. It's silly. We're all in the right place. And we're all doing the best we can. Deviji tells the story that somebody wrote them, Jyotishji and Deviji, a very strong and unpleasant letter filled with advice about things about themselves they could change or something. You can imagine, Jyotishji and Deviji. My God. And so Deviji was hurt by the letter, she says, very understandably. I mean, serving, giving, doing the best you can to help others, and somebody just... I was wondering where to store my dagger. Oh, in your heart. Perfect place for it. And so they brought the letter to Swamiji, and he read it. And he said, well, you're doing the best you can for who you are. And she understandably said, okay, that's fine. What about them? And Swamiji said, well, they're doing the best they can for who they are. And then he smiled and said, and I'm doing the best I can for who I am. You know, that's what we have to just relax around. That's this point of it takes goodness to see goodness. And that's what draws us onto the spiritual path, the goodness in us. Sees the goodness of the spiritual path, sees the goodness of Master, sees the goodness of Swamiji, and we're attracted to it. That statement, of course, is a truth, and it's something that Swamiji heard also from Anandamoyi Ma. He said to her at one point, he was just overwhelmed in her presence because she was such a saint. And he said, you are so good, Bhalo. And she said, it takes goodness to see goodness. And so remember that whatever goodness you see, it's because there's a goodness in you that's seeing it. How do you know? Because you might offer, for example, the same thing to somebody else, and they may not be attracted. It doesn't mean they're not good. It could mean they're on another spiritual path. But sometimes it does mean, like, what's the point of that? These spiritual people, they always got some hidden agenda. They're out for something, and watch out they don't take your money. Why? Because that person wants to take your money. It's really that simple. As Master said to somebody who always criticized, he said, you only bring out the same stench you are made of. You see, whatever is on people's minds, they'll assume that's what the other person is. A thief is always worried about other thieves. And so if someone tells you that, then you now know what's on their mind. Now, it doesn't mean there aren't false spiritual paths and so on. There aren't false situations where that can happen. Of course, we should use our common sense, but that's all obvious. It is being on the spiritual path doesn't make you stupid. You don't lose your intellect. But for most of us, we balance ourselves. If we've been too intellectual, we balance it also with strength of heart. If we've been, if we're strong in devotion, but it helps to feed the mind too, to understand more about life, how to deal with situations, and so on. But ultimately to just practice Kriya and go to God, because the heart feels that peace, and then really all of these things don't matter. Swamiji said when coming to Master, he would come with many questions to ask him, and then when he was with Master, it all kind of disappeared. And he couldn't think of a question to ask. And he said, well, I wonder, it's not like Babaji, who has the ability to stop a thought from forming in a person's mind. And I don't know if Master said, gosh, I'm not in the mood for questions today, so blew all the questions out of people's brains. I don't think so. But he said Swamiji said it was that questioning consciousness disappeared. That this was this way or was that way, it didn't really matter anymore. Just we're with Master, that's all that we need to know. And I found it was the same way for us with Swamiji. When we would be with him, it would just sort of stop everything. And I couldn't take my eyes off him when he was in the room. I was just so thrilled. I was also aware that how many times was I going to be in the same room with him? How many times, compared to people who had lived with him for decades, and how many times did we have left? So I was a little bit greedy that way too. But I don't regret it. And the things I do regret are times when I could have been with him and I wasn't for some reason. And the thing that I find sweet about that is that when we dedicated the temple downstairs, Sri Karthikeyan, many of you know him, came to dedicate that temple. I mean, we were very touched and honored he would come to our little temple and be a part of that. And I introduced him before he stood up to speak, and instead of just saying all of his credentials, and you all know he was the head of the CBI and all of that, I shared things that people might not have known, all the different programs that he organized for Swamiji in Delhi and so on. And at when Swamiji passed away, which is actually the date of that is coming up soon, April 21st, Karthikeyanji was speaking in, I've forgotten the name of the city now, but anyway, a big city in India, at a big conference. And when he found out Swamiji had left the body that morning, he dropped his whole talk that he was supposed to give at this conference and just spoke about Swamiji to the whole crowd and everybody. Just saying, I want you to know about this man and his life and how much we're going to miss him and so on. So when I finished that, Karthikeyanji came up and he was very quiet. And he said, I'm remembering times when Swamiji called me to come, but I didn't because of some other engagement, and none of those things actually mattered. And I regret that I didn't go and see Swamiji even one extra time during his lifetime and so on. The good news is we can be with Swamiji now. It's not as if that's any kind of a limitation. We can be with Master now. And remember, Master is with you now. I mean, you can't keep him away. So it's not as if that's over. But what we find when we first come onto the spiritual path too, though, is that there are parts of us that are still pulling away, still sort of resisting. And be patient with yourself. It's not as if when you identify an area of resistance that we say, that's terrible, I shouldn't. Knowing what to do and doing it are different things. Seeing something that we need to change, we can make the mistake that just the knowledge of what to do means that I know I should be behaving better because I've read the scriptures, I've heard from Master, you shouldn't do this, and I'm doing it. And because I'm not behaving correctly, it must mean I'm insincere or weak or bad. Not at all. Remember Arjuna saying to Krishna, what force is it that pushes a person against their will to do the wrong thing? So, I mean, if it pushes them against their will, what to speak of if their will is already in it? You see, then it's fine, even more so. So we're working with ourselves the way we are. There's no point, as Swamiji said, in getting excited about it. It's just something I'm working on, but be open with God. Why do people, as it says in the reading, and when I say people, I mean why do we all? What is that tendency, it says, to, when we make a mistake, try to cover it up? Well, there can be a few reasons for that. One reason is simply that it may be that when we have made mistakes in our lives, we have been hurt by those mistakes. Either because we did something we didn't realize was a mistake or we couldn't help it and it turned into a bad outcome. It could be that whenever we made a mistake, for example, even if we were young in school or with our parents or somebody, that they criticized any mistake that we made, and it was hard for us to take that criticism. As Master said, Sri Yukteswar was training him in that way. He said, if I got up and my foot turned over the corner of the carpet, this was in a big gathering, Sri Yukteswar would say, look at that clumsy oaf. And when Master tells the story, he says, Sri Yukteswar said, see how unmannerly he is. And he said, and everyone would laugh at me. Thousands of people. He said, that's hard to take. And this was Master, who if he wanted to, he didn't have to kick over the carpet. He could just levitate and float over to wherever the tea was or wherever he was going. And, people who were laughing at him were probably not levitating, otherwise they wouldn't be laughing. And so, it's, but that he needed that, so to speak. He was an avatar, but leaving that aside, let's just go along with the story the way he told it, because it helped him. He said, now no one can insult me. And that can be helpful if you had harsh treatment in your past. One thing it gives us, hopefully, is a thick skin. As Haridas Ji says, thick skin, soft heart. Somebody comes up to you and says, I think you're kind of a goof. And you say, really? That's great. That's like a sprinkling of salt compared to what I grew up with in from my whoever it was that tortured me. So I'll take a goof any day, my gosh. But the thing is that we should not be harsh with ourselves. We should just be at peace. And if somebody was harsh with us, or that's why we try to cover up our mistakes because we think it makes us vulnerable, it doesn't. Because we're making the same mistakes anyway. Swamiji said, if somebody points out a flaw in yourself, or you discover a flaw in yourself, he said, be glad, rejoice, celebrate, because it's been there all the time. And think about it. Suppose, you accidentally have like a big piece of masala stuck on your cheek. And then, somebody tells you, excuse me, I think there's a problem here. Did you have dosa this morning? How did you know? It's just, you're wearing it. And so he was, oh my God, what about the 5 other people who I talked to today who didn't say anything but seemed to be chuckling the whole time, laughing the whole time? And we sometimes say of a person who points out something like that, you are a true friend, because you're willing to tell me that there's something that I needed to fix about myself. So that flaw has been there all the time, and it's been causing us trouble. So be glad we've seen it. And not to be defensive about it. As Swamiji said, you sometimes will talk to somebody and say, none of us humans are perfect. That's right. We're not perfect. We're working on perfection, but we're not perfect. And, we all have flaws. And, that's right, everybody has flaws. And speaking of that, I wanted to mention there's one thing that you might like to work on. Oh, no. I don't have that problem. So Swamiji said, if we ever see in ourselves that instinctively our reaction is to defend or to deny something about ourselves, that's probably proof that it's a sensitive point, that there is something there. Even if it's not the thing that somebody's pointing out, but it's that thing of being criticized at all. That can't be. Why have that reaction? I mean, either it is or it isn't. As Swamiji said when he spoke in public for the first time, at first he thought he might feel nervous. I mean, he was speaking in Master's place to a full temple that was expecting Master, and instead got him and had never met him before. And he said a habit of daily meditation had made them, I've forgotten the word, not refined, but basically had made them gracious, because none of them left. Because you can imagine them going, random. And nobody did. He said people were sticking their heads through the windows and everything. Because it was a full house. And he said, but what would I be nervous about? Well, he wouldn't want people to. He said, I wouldn't want people to think me a fool. And he said, well, maybe I am a fool. And if I am a fool, what does it matter if people see it? It's true anyway, if it is. And if I'm not a fool, what does it matter if people think it? You see, so just be clear in yourself who you are with God. Don't worry about what anybody else thinks. Somebody thinking something doesn't make it true. And so, also, let's be careful in any of our, as it says also, it takes goodness to see goodness, and it takes evil to see evil. That is, to take special note of it. If there's something that's dark and we focus on it, that means there's something dark in us that's resonating with it. Why focus on those things? Why go in that direction? There's a wonderful line of in Swamiji's song, what we need is light. And the song says, some proclaim all men are sinners. They can't escape the devil's might. They can't escape Maya. In the sort of, in this country, the version of that is you cannot escape your karma. Can't escape the devil's might. And then he says, how their interest must intrigue him. They won't let him out of sight. And so why focus on that? Someone said that to me once. You cannot escape your karma. Everything you do is ordained by your karma. And then nothing can be changed. It cannot be altered in any way. It cannot be sped up, anything. And I really wanted to agree with him, because after all, I was in his home sipping his tea and, wanted to be gracious guest. But I couldn't very well go along with that fully. There was someone else from this path there with me. And I said, well, our guru taught that Kriya Yoga can actually help you to burn up your karma, and you can burn up your karma more quickly. And he said, but you will only learn Kriya Yoga if it is your karma. It's true. So I chuckle. I had to concede that was the point. And many years later, the man contacted me and said, can I please learn Kriya Yoga? Wonderful philosophy, but I think there'd been enough suffering to say, help. So, anyway, I wish that he had. He wasn't able to. He was just too busy. But still, I keep him in my prayers. So, that part of us that latches on to something wrong with someone, there's even that saying, remember, if you see anything wrong in this world, it's wrong with you. Master said that. That's a tricky one. Because suppose we see some terrible injustice done against innocent people and we say that's wrong. No, it's wrong in you. Okay, you have to meditate and go a little more deeply than that. So let's not go with it on a vast scale. That's just the mind sort of stops at. Even though it's true on that level, that may be too much. Let's take an easier step. So we see something wrong with a person. Usually we only focus on it because it hurts us. It bothers us. It irritates us. And so why do we let it irritate us? You see, that's the thing. That's the power that we have to withdraw our needing this to be a certain way so I can feel peace. To be strong in ourselves. It's sort of like, we have a plate full of food in front of us, and we go over to someone else and are trying to take their food, and they're batting our hands away, and we're saying, but I need it, Venom. And it's just like, look, you have your own. What does it matter about this other person's thing? And just leave them be. Let them be. And so, but it's not that. It's they're coming to take my food. Well, maybe give them half. It was a wonderful story. Someone said to Master, what if someone came to your house and they asked you for food and you made food and they threw it on the ground? What would you do? Master said, I would make them something else. And then, what if they threw that on the ground? And then Master said, I would make them someone else. And what if they threw that on the ground? And first of all, you can see where this is going. Nowhere is going on. Master said, I would make something else and I would give them half and I would eat half. Sorry, it was the question was, what if you were just sitting down to your meal and someone came in and asked for it? He said, I would give them half and I would eat half. And Swamiji said, it's such a practical answer. You see? And it's realistic. It's grounded. This person, of course, can you imagine? Did they say, Abhidya, thank you, you have healed me? No, they said, samsari, sinner! They were just caught up in this theoretical view of things. I bet that guy had his own lunch afterwards and maybe didn't share with anyone. You see, it's ridiculous to get hung up on this one little thing. But anyway, it's okay. We all do it in some way. So if we're focusing on something that isn't right, then what's usually about that is that we just don't like it because it's disturbing us. And that's what's wrong with us. Meaning that's what needs to be corrected. That's what needs to be healed. I don't mean it's wrong like a judgment. That's wrong. Yeah. If you ever feel I've done something wrong, yeah. That is not the necessary helpful attitude. Say, okay, what can I do about it? So that I don't have to have my peace disturbed. So I don't have to feel at the mercy of when I walk into the room this morning, what kind of mood is that person going to be in? Good mood means I can also be in a good mood. I understand that very much from my own life experience, but it's really for us to get strong and independent in ourselves. Just like the song, Walk Like a Man. Be in yourself. Don't let it bother you. How? One simple way, meditation. Because it gives us that peace. It's not an affirmation. It's not logic. Okay, so when you say you can't stand the sight of me, in my mind I'm going to translate that to you must be hungry. And so, we can do that if we can, but why not better just, you can't stand the sight of me. Well, I don't mind the sight of you, usually. And so, we find a way to just not worry about it. Someone said to me once, I wish you had never been born. And I said, too late. You should have, wished back in 19 whatever, but it's too late for that. That ship has sailed. Here I am. So, but because I was in a good mood, I didn't let it bother me. I was lucky. It could have easily bothered me. Other things have bothered me. That one didn't. Oh, well, so what? Who cares? Here I am. And if you like, I can go be born somewhere else. That's the other thing. Stick with the positive. Cleave to the positive. Cling. Be with all that's positive in you. Follow that. And that's another way to deal with the darkness of misunderstanding in us. We just move more and more in the light, and that tends to get cleared out. Don't focus on those things trying to fix them necessarily. Sometimes you have to. But more often than not, focusing on a flaw of our own just increases it. Just try to do the balancing action as best you can and pray to God and ask Him for help with it. Don't get too uptight about it. And with other people too, give them patience, give them understanding. Doesn't mean they can receive it. Doesn't mean you can say to them, I respect you as a soul and I know that you have your own... maybe not. Maybe all you can say is Chai Venuma. That's the only thing that they'll take. And remember, that's helpful because when they're drinking the chai, they can't talk. So just be patient with others. Let them be as they are, even if it's difficult. I don't mean that happens overnight. I mean, try to be 1% more patient, maybe each day. Do the best you can. And if your feelings do get hurt, which is usually at the core of everything, my feelings were hurt. I remember saying to someone, something had happened to her, somebody had been nasty, and she said, and I was mad. And I said, well, or hurt. She said, no, I was pretty mad. I was mad. I don't remember being hurt. But of course she was hurt. That's why she was mad. And then later she said, okay, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. But so let's have that in ourselves. I'm hurt, and what hurts me about this? And then let me try to heal that part of myself. My happiness depends on this person liking me. No. My happiness depends on this thing. No. Find a way that even if this thing does go wrong, I have many other things to be happy about. We're not going to have a perfect score in life. Every single thing is a success. If we actually had that life, what would it mean? It would mean that we never challenged ourselves. We never pushed our boundaries. We never grew beyond anything. Every day, the teacher said to us in school, 2 + 2, 4, again, and that's it. You know, you're 15 years old, 2 + 2, 4, you know. You need at least do 2 + 3. I mean, something else, you know, expand. And so Divine Mother is testing us. She's helping us to grow because we have asked her, because we want to merge in her. God bless you.